Mossy Shallon, and I'm the current president of CFM. And I just want to welcome you all. We appreciate so much your attendance. You look forward to your engagement in this morning's summit. I also want to ask you, if you would, and if you haven't, to go to your chat box, and if you would just put your name and then the organization that you were representing, that would be very much appreciated. Welcome to our 7th Affiliate Summit, and of course this is our first virtual summit. We're glad you're here. We hope you are well, and again, thank you for your time today. I'd like to also have a quick thank you to our sponsors and to our guest speakers who really will make this summit one of the best, if not the best, that we've had, even in a virtual environment. I'd also want to give the shout out to Michelle and to the staff for the work that's gone into putting the summit together, and appreciate for those of you who were able to provide input, complete survey information. That was very helpful in getting the agenda for today and tomorrow. And without further ado, I would like to move forward with this morning's agenda.
Okay, I guess that means me.
Yes, Jenny, please.
All right, I'm Jenny Wallace. I'm CFM secretary, and I have been invited to come do a little orientation based on the survey input. Orientation of CFM, a little bit about CFM history and our affiliates and where everybody fits. Yay. So we're just going to pull the presentation up. Technical challenges are always good. I think it's going to go here. There we go. All right. So you are, there is always a little delay here. I know this worked before. You might, will it advance for you? There. Okay, she has, okay, so Michelle is going to advance for me, so I will be saying, Michelle, advance, but not yet. So this is our logo and our seal, and you may advance. So I wanted to start with, who the heck is CFM? Next. We are a membership organization. We have in the neighborhood, give or take, right now, or the other day, 2,607 members, but it ranges a little bit. We are also a federation, and a federation, the definition is a union of organizations. And you are those organizations, and there are 101 of you affiliates, totaling about 82,000 members. And we are all united. The thing that pulls us all together is the common purpose of, next slide, ensuring the conservation of Missouri's wildlife and natural resources. That's our history, it's our legacy, it's our future, it's our reason for being. So how did we get here? Go ahead. So in the early days, and I wanted to go back to this because I used to read a lot of Henry Rowe Schoolcraft and Lewis and Clark things, and just to take us back a few minutes to, and you can go ahead and do the next two. And just the land that was Missouri was abundant with fish and wildlife resources and forests. We had tremendous forests in the Ozarks. And people wrote about it. People came to see it. And then by the 1920s, you can go ahead. the deer population was down to no more than 2,000. We were once a leading timber producing state, and by 1920 there were no trees left to cut in the Ozarks. And Missourians were concerned. You can, next slide. And a lot of citizens reacted. And in those early decades of the 1900s, quite a few nature and resource-oriented organizations formed, including, and the ones that are listed here, Missouri Birding Society, Missouri Ducks Unlimited State Council, St. Louis Audubon Society, Burroughs Audubon Society in Kansas City, and the Missouri Society for American Foresters, all are now affiliates of CFM, and they predated CFM. And then in 1935, a group of sportsmen came together. No doubt you've heard this story. I hope you have. I hope you've read about it in the magazine. But it's historic, and it bears repeating over and over and over again. They came together and said, we have got to take the politics out of fish and wildlife conservation. And so they organized, originally as the Restoration and Conservation Federation, to do just that, to take the politics out, okay? And their first act was to put together an amendment, Amendment 4, the initiative petition campaign that created the Conservation Commission and as an independent entity from the legislature and the formation of the Missouri Department of Conservation. Next slide. And it truly, next slide, sorry. It truly was the very first apolitical science-based conservation agency in the world. That we cannot underplay the importance of that to Missouri resources over the years. And again, in 1976, we spearheaded the passage of the sales tax, and again in 1984, the Parks and Soil Sales Tax. The unique thing about Missourians is that they consistently tax themselves for the benefit of natural resources, and CFM has a hand in that. So next slide. And there's a bunch of little entries to this. So let's look at a little bit of an abbreviated timeline. So we were founded in 1935, Amendment 4 passed in 1936, the first Wildlife and Forestry Code was in 1940, the Wildlife and Forestry Act was 1946, and in 1955, that's the earliest date that we have records of affiliates joining. And so this is where affiliates come into the story. Next. So the very first affiliates were these, 1955, Tipton Farmers and Sportsmen's Club, Northside Conservation Federation, Festus Crystal City Conservation Club, and the Southside Division of CFM. And we gained 2 additional affiliates in 1956. The Ozark Wilderness Waterways Club and Missouri Trout Fishermen's Association. And in the 1960s, over the course of that decade, Missouri Park and Recreation Association, the Anglers of Missouri, Missouri Bow Hunters, Big Game Hunters, Missouri State Campers Association, and more. And what I want you to pay attention to is the fact that already there is a very broad diversity of organizations and perspectives. And now we have a huge tent. We have a huge tent with multiple organizations, very diverse. Not everyone's mission is compatible in all things, but we all are focused on that one mission. So let's go back to our mission and talk about how CFM works to accomplish it through advocacy, education, and partnerships. So advocacy is our first slide. So we have the Legislative Action Center, the Legislative Policy Committee. We host a Conservation Day at the Capitol, and many, many affiliates are engaged in that and have been in the past. We have Natural Resource Advisory Committees, 10 of them, and they focus on resolutions and also just staying current with what are the issues that CFM should be addressing. And CFM resolutions are one of the most powerful expressions of our opinion as a conservation organization. They are hugely important and cannot be underestimated. So for education, and you'll hear about some of these along the next day or so, Conservation Leadership Corps, the Missouri Conservation Collegiate Alliance, the Youth Conservation Action Committee, we have scholarships, the Governor's Youth Turkey Hunt. Our annual convention is an educational bonanza, I guess, of opportunity. I have Conservation Day at the Capitol again by design because it is also an education event. And our affiliate summit, as we are here, and of course our magazine and our bi-weekly e-newsletter. All of those are education. And partnerships. And partnerships is a broad term, including you, our affiliates, our Share the Harvest program, our corporate and business partnerships, we are a National Wildlife Federation affiliate, and then various other partnerships, including the David Risberg Memorial Grants that Michelle will be talking about, I believe, after me. And again, also with many state and federal agencies, we work closely with all of them. So how do we do this? How does this work happen? Well, it happens through our regular committees, of which there are many, and some of these are administrative in nature, our Ways and Means, Budget and Finance, Strategic Planning. How are we moving forward as an organization? Where are we going? How can we afford to get there? Membership, marketing, nominating committee, all of those. But also some of our coordinating committees for our partnerships like Share the Harvest and a couple others that I already mentioned. And then most importantly is our resource advisory committees. And these are really where the rubber hits the road. And you're going to hear more about them. I think Jeff Blystone is going to talk a little bit more about them tomorrow, I believe. But this is where our committee chairs and vice chairs can get information about what's happening. What are the issues in archery and shooting sports? What are the issues with big game turkey and fur bears? You know, we are soon to have some kind of a bear hunting process. That's something that our resource advisory committee should be on top of. And all the way down the lines. And our committees are hugely important, and we need people, just a little commercial here because I also serve on the resolutions committee. We need people to serve on these. And I think that's a good segue to the next slide. So I want to come back to this big tent slide. I think that our diversity is our greatest strength, but it can also be our biggest challenge. Each of our affiliates, each of you has an important mission, and your focus is on your mission, and that's really important. Together, where our missions overlap, and that again is to ensure conservation of Missouri's wildlife and natural resources, that's where we can be a huge voice in Missouri. When we pull together on that common interest, nothing can stop us. And so I want to encourage all of us. We are not going to be able to take on every issue of every affiliate. It's not our job to do that. Our job is to work collectively together for this very, very important mission. Next slide. So we want to keep our eyes on the prize. So what can you do as an affiliate? Encourage your members to join CFM in addition to your affiliate organization. Encourage your members, your leadership, to run for a board position for CFM. Please share your knowledge and expertise. Each of you has special knowledge and expertise in your areas, and we need all of that collective knowledge in service of our mission. Serve on resource advisory committees. If you are aware of an issue, don't assume that somebody already knows about it. Get in contact with Tyler. He will get in contact with a resource advisory committee and we'll take it from there. Please help us set good policy through the resolutions process. And in order for us to help you and for you to help us, we need your information to be kept current. So even though it might seem like one more administrative thing to do, please try to remember to complete your annual affiliate application so we have the most up-to-date information and we can contact you about upcoming opportunities or legislative issues. And we'd also ask that if it's within your policy to please share your membership list. The more people we can reach, the better off we can be and the more easily we can be the voice for Missouri Outdoors, which is the role of our citizens organization in making sure that Missouri has abundant fish, wildlife, and forests for many, many generations to come. And with that, I guess if there are questions, what would you have them do? Chat? Okay. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to enter them in the chat. I think we have like maybe a minute or so, if there are any. Okay.
Thank you, Jenny. As Jenny mentioned, next we will have Michelle talking about the David Risberg Memorial Grant and grant opportunities for CFM affiliates.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Gamelsberger. I am the Membership Development Coordinator for CFM. I also am the liaison for the affiliate program and help assist with the David Risberg Memorial Grants. The David Risberg Memorial Grants are awarded by the Conservation Federation of Missouri in honor of David A. Risberg. Only CFM affiliate organizations in good standings are eligible to apply. The purpose of these grants is to provide an opportunity for affiliates to take action on conservation by implementing projects funded in whole or part through this endowment. We've completed 3 years. We've funded over 40 projects. The 2021 application period opens today and closes December 31st, 2020. I'd like to take this time to show you a video presented by John and Mary Risberg.
From a very young age, he was very adventuresome. He wanted to climb trees, he wanted to hike, he wanted to explore. I mean, that's kind of why we came out here, one of the reasons. He could hunt here. He did a lot of turkey hunting out here, a lot of fishing with John on the lake, and so he really enjoyed the outdoors. He felt very comfortable there. He was very creative, and it was just a place where you could just tell he was at, loved.
My son had been so wide-ranging in his interest. He had started out in Scouts, archery, the Silver Bullet Award. He was always into that. That led to an interest in hunting, shooting sports. He got into trap and skeet. Then as you get further along, right, you get into it, and you start thinking college and what do I want to be? He decided I want to go into some kind of a conservation specialty. So that led him from just being an outdoors person generally to his interest in all the various aspects of habitat management.
Through the tragic loss of David's life in an automobile accident, his parents, John and Mary Risberg, approached CFM with an idea to fund our affiliates for boots-on-the-ground conservation programs.
Yeah, it was actually a match made in heaven. When David died, I was casting about for something that would be appropriate. It became immediately apparent that to do something for the affiliates, to put together a fund that would enable affiliates to implement the types of projects that my son thought were so important.
I really think this is something that would just be totally right up his alley. Just the variety of the applicants is just heartwarming. I mean, to see all these people say, we want to do work, we want to, clean the environment, clean up the streams, plant the prairies, and just do all that work, and he would be right out there with them.
John and Mary are just such great people. They wanted to find a way to give back through David's legacy so that the work that he did can live on through so many future generations of conservationists in Missouri. This year, every dollar raised through the fund will be matched by John and Mary, so please consider giving generously so that we can continue this fund for generations to come.
This year we've made a challenge grant of $50,000. We'll match dollar for dollar. We're still obviously a driving force here, but certainly our hope is that this thing will have legs and that there will be others that take our place, right, and replenish the fund and keep it going. From our perspective, that's how David his life is continuing to have meaning and vitality, right? Those people out there that are being able to do what they're doing because of this fund, that's how his spirit remains alive.
As you see from that touching video, these grants are very warm and touching to the Risbergs. Some of the things that CFM is going to award about $20,000 in the 2021 grant cycle. These grants are to support the implementation of conservation stewardship projects by affiliates within Missouri. Grant requests up to $2,500 will be considered. Partial funding of the amount of the grant request may be awarded by the committee. Please indicate that on your application. The projects should fit at least one of the following categories. Provide support for implementing a conservation project, provide an opportunity for people to take action on a conservation issue, or grow the conservation movement. Provide support enabling an affiliate to implement a conservation program, project, or campaign to advance conservation priorities. I'm going to show you where you can find the information on our website. Go to confedmo.org. Under programs, you'll find actions. You'll find the David Risberg Memorial Affiliate Grant Program. And you can see the 2018 grants and 2019 grants that have been awarded. Through here will be the information about grant awards, eligibility of applicants, the project, should fit one of those items I just talked about, your eligibility, the proposal format, our ranking system, and of course, important grant cycle dates that are important. The 2021 CFM David Rivasberg Memorial Grant application is on our website right here. You can contact me, Michelle Gablesberger, for more information. Also, if you want to look back, who received our 2020 grant, we handed out 17 and we shared $17,730 for these wonderful projects in conservation. Also, in the video that we watched, we are currently in the middle of a challenge the Rivasbergs have given us. We're halfway through that challenge. So if you know someone or would like to help raise more funds to carry this grant project, put money in the endowment to carry it forward, please reach out to me or Tyler, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer the questions you have. Thank you, and let me know.
Hello, we'd like to offer anything to you guys that if you need assistance, need help with the affiliate application, let me know. We've made the application as seamless and as easy as possible. So go out there, download it, fill it out in its entirety, and we should hopefully have those by December 31st. Again, contact us if you have any questions.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, next we'll have Tyler, who's here in the CFM office, and I believe Kaina is going to be joining virtually. And so it'll be a legislative training and CFM update, where they'll discuss legislative efforts and strategies on how you and your organization can become more involved.
Thanks, Mossy. Thanks, everybody, first of all, for attending this historic summit on our wonderful 85th anniversary. It's a day to celebrate, and I wish we could all be in person, but we're not. And so I appreciate everybody taking the time to join us virtually. And one of the topics that we're going to talk about now is the legislative efforts. And I'm going to go over some of the highlights and different things that we've done in the past year. And then Kaina is going to join us virtually and do a PowerPoint presentation for you. So first, I want to start off on a good note. House Bill 1711 that was passed this past year, that was signed into law by the governor back in July. That was a great opportunity for expanding the Share the Harvest program into our snack sticks. And so we look forward to feeding, hungry children and getting the protein-rich venison into the snack stick program. So that was certainly a huge win. And thank you to everyone that worked through those efforts to contact your legislator and do everything that we could to get that through. We had over 99% support through the House and the Senate. So that was just remarkable. That really tells to the validity of that bill and the good things that we passed through that. So that was a great thing. Recovering America's Wildlife Act, it's been out there and you've heard a lot. Geraldine's going to talk about that in her report tomorrow. And then the Great American Outdoors Act, you all heard about that earlier. That was signed into law too. So she'll also touch about that one on a national level. And we're working on recovering with Senator Blunt's office and trying to help get him to take a lead. So that's been a process, but stay tuned, and we're going to rely on you all as we move forward with that one. I want to visit a little bit about the Legislative Committee. Certainly this committee is engaged, and I appreciate all their efforts, and they're really they're meeting year round now, and it's just been a great opportunity to engage in the legislative process. And something new they're doing this year, if you haven't been already, you'll be contacted by somebody on that group, and we're just trying to gauge your level of engagement, know that we can lean on you so we can get information out to you. And so we're calling it kind of a phone tree that we're setting up, and it's been a good process to just get some feedback and hear what we can do to better support you all. Also, there's a webinar that we did one a couple months ago. We're going to do one again next month, so look forward to that. Again, just more opportunities to engage and be more involved and try and get information out there to you. The coolest thing that we have out there right now is our legislative survey, and so that's out to all candidates. So as a C3, we cannot engage in elections, but what we can do is send a survey to every candidate, which we've done. They have till September 18th to fill that out, get information back to us, and so you, as voters and citizens, are more informed. So that's something new that the committee did. Mary Nemesek took the lead on that, worked with Kina and Michelle and Steve, and just a great job of getting that out there. So appreciate that, and those results will be published on our website. So you can go out there and it'll either say no response or tell you what their issues was, and we covered everything, and that conservation, natural resources. So it's a good opportunity to become more informed as a voter. And that committee, again, Zach Morris leads the chair on that, and Steve Jones is the vice chair. Jim Kent, Robert Brundage, myself, David Graber, J.C. Kusner, Zach Pollock, Ethan Duke, Dana Ripper, Mike Shallon, Mary Nemesek, Colton Zirkle, Richard Mendenhall, and Kina Iman, our lobbyists, are on that committee. So thanks to all your efforts that you all do. Certainly appreciate everything. Kina does such a great job in the Capitol, and we look forward to working with her, and you're going to hear from her in a little bit. A couple other things I want to touch base on quickly. We always can use your member list to get that into our Legislative Action Center. We've asked before, and I get it, I know not everyone can, but if you can, please consider submitting your name, address, email, and we'll put it into your system. We don't share those with anybody. And so we need to get the message out and help get information across. That's the quickest tool that we have. And if you need access to that center too on issues, we can, zone into counties, to congressional districts, Senate districts, all that different stuff. So please don't be scared to reach out and use that tool for your organization as well. Something that was in the paper a couple weeks ago, if you haven't heard, the Conservation Department sued the state over their spending authority. MDC filed a lawsuit, and that was on August 27th. And that was over spending revenue for conservation purposes. And I guess I'd call that a friendly lawsuit that happens from time to time. So MDC sued the Attorney General's office and OA, and so they'll hopefully, what we think would be a good judgment over the constitutional authority. We know what it says in the Constitution, but some of the language in the appropriations bill last session over land purchases wasn't quite clear. So that'll get sorted out hopefully this year, and it'll be a positive thing going forward for us. Also engaging with your legislators. I want you to think how you can engage them in the off season. So many times we see opportunities, they get so much information up here on the Capitol and stuff, but think how you can engage them in the off season. Invite them to a meeting or have them for coffee, take them out on a field trip and stuff. They remember those things, and it's important to build those relationships with your senators and reps. So moving forward, we're going to try and target some of those field trips and things and help some of our affiliates. So when we get in your area, we'll reach out to you and get you along. And so it's just another way to build those relationships with all of our elected officials in the Capitol. Because, especially in an election year, that face time that you get right now is so important. And they're out there on the streets and they'll listen to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Kina, but thank you again for everyone for all your efforts this past session. And, we always look at how we can measure success on the legislative efforts. And for another year in a row, no conservation outdoor bills that we were targeting passed throughout the process. And so that's huge. Again, that's another year in a row. And so that's how we have to measure our success. And so pat yourselves on the back. Doing a great job, everyone. We're just ramping up efforts and building steam, because these battles never stop. you know, the players change and it just continues. And we're going to keep up the fight, growing our voice stronger and stronger. So thank you for all that you do, and certainly appreciate everyone's efforts, and look forward to having a great summit with you.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. I am going to try to share my screen to get our slideshow going. Host has spotlighted your video for everyone. There we go. So, can everybody see that? There we go. So, as Tyler said, happy anniversary to everybody. I'm really excited to be a part of the 85th anniversary affiliate summit. Wish I could see all of you guys in person. Really miss seeing your faces, but it's been a busy summer. It's been crazy. And I'm here to just make your life a little busier and get you involved in this legislative process and how we can get going. I know you already know what CFM is, and Jenny kicked us off by giving us our mission to ensure conservation of Missouri's wildlife and natural resources and preservation of our state's rich outdoor heritage through advocacy, education, and partnerships. We are the Missouri voice of Missouri Outdoors. You are the voice of Missouri Outdoors. But here's the deal. You have to get involved in the legislative process if people are going to hear your voice. And why should you do that? I think you've heard me say before, everything that you advocate for could be lost in the legislature by one vote. And we learned that in the primaries. We had 141 votes in one district that counted tremendously on who we're sending to the Senate. And that's why we need you to get involved, to create a more friendly environment for the conservation and outdoors, and fight and protect that conservation and recreational interests in the state. It's not always going to be easy. We're not going to have always have easy share, the harvest, feel good bills. Those are to build fences, to build up relationships and tear down fences. But we've got a lot on our plate for next year. I'm not going to go through this. If you guys don't know how a bill becomes law, I encourage you to click into that. Schoolhouse Rock is probably more entertaining than this, how a bill becomes law. But if you have any questions on that, I'll go through it later with you. Missouri has 163 House of Representatives, and this is the breakout, 34 Senate members. And as you know, this is an election year, so all 163 House members are up for re-election in November, and half of the Senate are up. So it's time for you to reach out and find out who your legislators are and make sure they know who you are. Legislators are, they are fundraisers. I've been getting hundreds of calls in the last couple weeks because veto session's next week and they're all having fundraisers. They have to be good sales representatives. They campaign nonstop. They have to lobby also for our issues, but most importantly, the really good legislators are the ones who listen. So how do we shape this legislative process? Through advocacy. It's not a bad word. It's your First Amendment right, and you need to step up and let people know that you have issues that CFM cares dearly about, and if you're not speaking out, your opponents are. So here's a few pointers on how you can effectively advocate. And they're just common sense items, but I want to point out a few key ones that I think a lot of people overlook. Always be informed and polite. That's a given. We try to, at CFM, give you all the information you need. Steve Jones is fabulous at writing information on the LAC, Legislative Action Network, on how to take action, how to have a personal conversation about these issues. But the key thing on this slide is to have a specific ask. A lot of people go in and say, do you like conservation? And they're like, yeah, I love to hunt, I love to fish. But do you ever really have that specific ask? Like, will you vote to protect MDC's conservation sales tax? And issues like that. But most importantly, follow up and remain in contact. I can't tell you how many people I see come to the Capitol once a year And then they go home and they never stay in contact with these legislators until they come back the next year. And they expect the legislators to remember them and their issues. So follow up and remain in contact. Do your homework. Right now, almost all legislators have a website. It gives you a biography on them. It gives you, and the sitting legislators usually have listed what awards they've received. Almost all of them have Facebook pages now. Really not that hard to get a little background information if you do a little bit of homework on your own. And then ask them, you know, what do we have to do to pass our legislation and when? Get their feedback, start that conversation. When's an important time to talk to your legislator? That's why you belong to CFM and why you want to get our action alerts, because we're going to tell you when they're going to have a committee hearing, when there's going to be a vote. Need your input. We're currently at that stage where I'm working with several CFM members on perfecting the prescribed burn legislation. So I threw this in because in case you don't know when to avoid inappropriate contact, here's a few common sense issues you should avoid. Remember that you are the expert. Don't overlook the staff. They are kind of the gatekeeper to legislators. They can be your best friend. I can't tell you how much time I spend just getting to know the legislative assistants, and keep them as involved as you keep the senators and state reps. And if you're a constituent, that speaks volumes. I mean, I can walk into any state rep or state senate office, but if I walk in with a constituent, let them know that you're a voter in their district, they will drop everything and say, sit down, I want to hear your input and what your experience is. Before you make any contact, do a little practice, just like your homework. Have your notes lined out on what you want to talk about. Have the facts. No fake news is allowed in this job. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. Don't try to make it up. Just let them know you'll get the answer for them and get back with them. They will appreciate that more than you sitting there trying to BS your way through some answer that they find out later has no merit. So how to make contact with a legislator. Like Tyler said, we have a great Legislative Action Center. I encourage you to use it. All you have to do is type in your address. It is so user-friendly. Even a techno idiot like me can use it. If you can't make it to the Capitol, which, you know, right now is very difficult under COVID, write them a letter, make a call. And they are taking more emails now and text messages. So if you're really good friends, they'll give you their cell phone number and you can text them and follow up on the Legislative Action Center. Make sure that what you're sending them is clear, concise, consistent, and make sure that ask is in there and what you want. So here's just some other last minute items. Like I said, face-to-face is best, but right now during COVID, that's not really your best option. But don't forget to do your homework, find their schedules through Facebook, website, make sure you reach out to them. They're home right now campaigning. They want to meet you. So I've already had several of the Governmental Affairs Committee members let me know about some new state reps that are running in their area that they're going to follow up with. And then just once you reach out to them, like I said, don't forget to send them thank you notes and give them credit where credit is due. So we need your voice, we need your persistence, and we definitely need your advocacy. Don't think for a second that your efforts don't make a difference, because if we don't stand up for our conservation rights in Missouri, who will? So that's all I had, Tyler. I just really want to thank everybody for helping us make the passage of House Bill 1711 a reality, and I look forward to working this fall with the processors to get those meat sticks in the kids' buddy backpack programs. We're doing continuing education on the feral hog eradication. I can't tell you how good Jake Buxton has been. He's at the Department of Conservation and has been doing field trips with incoming legislators and sitting reps and new incoming senators all summer long, and that is going to make a tremendous amount of difference when we're sitting in a conservation committee hearing and the hog doggers come in and say they want to shoot these feral hogs all over the state, and we are actually going to have legislators sitting on that committee that have been out and saw how the trapping is working and how our issue, I think, is the right way to go. Tyler mentioned the questionnaire. That's the first time we're doing it for CFM. I'm really excited to get the feedback back. We were able to get questions in there for state parks, for DNR, about reusable, recyclable plastic bags, getting the ban off, the plastic bag ban, a lot of those issues. So I'm excited to see what kind of feedback we get from the candidates. And those are due, I think, September 18th, right, Tyler? And then last but not least, Conservation Day. You know, we've got one planned for early April. Who knows right now if we'll be able to pull that off. We kind of have to wait and see what COVID looks like. But don't burn this opportunity while you're sitting at home on the computer to reach out and do some homework, like I said, and get to know these legislators and find out what their hot buttons are. Do they like to fish? Do they like to hunt? Do they like to hike? Do they have kids? Do they have grandkids? There is always something in conservation that we have in common. And you just have to find what they like and take it from there. It's not like you're trying to sell, I don't know, life insurance policies or something. It's an easy sell to sell conservation and outdoors and parks and rec. I mean, it's common. You've got to be able to find some common thread with every single legislator in the legislature. We just have to be diligent and do our homework. So with that, Mossy and Tyler, I think that's all I have, other than please don't forget to register to vote. And like I said, we had some great successes during the August primary, and I'm looking forward to more success in the November elections. And it's just gonna take a lot of people getting out and educating your legislators on how important conservation is. So any questions, you can send them to me in chat. I can read them.
And thank you so much. We appreciate all you do.
Certainly. Thank you, and appreciate everyone's efforts again, and good information, and keep in touch. You know, we'll be getting out there and getting a hold of you next session back in January and let you know our priorities. And when we lean on you, please respond. It does make a difference. So thanks again. We've got just a minute or two if there's a quick question, but then we're going to go to a couple-minute break, give you all a chance to use the restroom, grab another cup of coffee, keep you alive here, stretch and stand up, and then we're going to talk about bears. And Jenny mentioned that earlier in the Resource Advisory Committee, how our the committee went together and put together some great information that we submitted and on the bears and the commission meeting last week. And so we're going to let you hear from the Laura herself. She's going to get a great presentation put together about the exciting black bears in Missouri. So any questions coming through? Got just a minute to give our 85th anniversary plug.
Yes.
For tonight. It's going to be an awesome opportunity to hopefully sit back. We're going to celebrate, and you got great messages from Director Pauly, Lieutenant Governor, the Governor, Charlie Davidson, Dave Murphy's going to be here, and so great opportunity to sit back and hear some cool stories and celebrate with us. So hopefully, if you haven't registered already, take the opportunity, spend an hour with us this evening celebrating on this historic day.
Okay, thanks everybody. We'll take a quick break and reconvene at 11. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm now pleased to introduce Laura Conley, who is a fur bear and black bear biologist for the Missouri Department of Conservation. Laura received her BS from Northern Illinois University and an MS from Southern Illinois University, where she studied space use and habitat selection of long-tailed weasels. After school, Laura became the fur bear and black bear project leader for the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, where she began her career working with bears. Laura came to MDC in 2016 and is responsible for research and management of Missouri's fur bearers and bears. Laura leads the state's Black Bear Research Project, conducts research and monitoring activities for a variety of fur bears, and also co-chairs the large carnivore response team. In her free time, I hope she does get some free time, she enjoys hiking, hunting, and fishing with her family. Laura, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I'm seeing, oh, perfect. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you for having me here today. And we'll cover a bit of bear biology. And I like to go through some of this with folks just to give them a basic understanding of what bears do, why they behave the way they do, and why that sometimes leads to some additional management challenges for such a big species. We'll also discuss the research that MDC has done over the last decade for black bears, and then discuss our black bear management plan here in Missouri. All right, so Missouri's black bear population is connected to a much larger population in Arkansas and Oklahoma. So between the three states, we're looking at about 8,000 bears in the central interior highlands. So really the Ozarks and Ouachitas of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And Oklahoma and Arkansas both have established bear hunting seasons. Arkansas in the 1980s and Oklahoma in 2000. And both states, just like Missouri, still have a growing and expanding bear population. So you can go to the next slide. Okay. Now, Missouri is home to a growing bear population, and with that growing bear population, we're also seeing range expansion here. So primary bear range is really south of Interstate 44, so the red polygon here, and bear range is expanding though into more northern and eastern areas of the state. So you can see these blue polygons, and these are expansion areas. So these are areas that in some locations have established bears. In other circumstances, we're starting to get a lot more frequent dispersers showing up in these areas. So we do have resident bears that live around the Lake of the Ozarks. We frequently get dispersers southwest of St. Louis. And as these bears kind of move and expand, they're coming into areas that are just more populated with people. So that does present some management challenges there with folks getting to understand what it means to be bear aware, what it means to live in bear country, and have the possibility of these bears moving through their landscape or their neighborhoods and their farms and things like that. And in 2020 so far, we've received over 300 bear reports at this point. So you can go ahead and advance. Now, again, as we've said a couple of different times, bears are becoming increasingly more common in the state. And so we're at a population of about 540 to 840 black bears, and that population's growing at about 9% annually. So with that growth rate, we expect the population to double in about 10 years. So realistically, we'll be looking at over 1,000 bears on the Missouri landscape in the next decade. Next slide. Now, we'll just give a little bit of an overview of bear biology, keep this pretty basic, but it gives you kind of an idea as to why bears do what they do. Now, bears are technically classified as carnivores, but when we start to talk about their diet, that may seem a little bit odd to you, but it's really based on their teeth that they're classified in that way. And the scientific name for the black bear, Ursus americanus, is actually the Latin name for bear of America. And black bears are only found in North America, so they are not found in other parts of the world. Next slide. Black bears are the smallest of the bear species, and that being said, they can still range quite a bit in weight. Here in Missouri, the largest bear that we've recorded through our research project was just over 500 pounds. In other parts of the country, they can get much larger than that. And on the smaller end, we're talking about yearling bears, where they're typically below 100 pounds, but they do grow very rapidly and pack on the weight pretty quickly. Now, most black bears are black and they have tan muzzles. And this generates a lot of confusion here because we do not only have black phased black bears. We have blonde phase, we have cinnamon phase. So the photo on the right, that yearling there is a blonde phase black bear. The photo on the left is a cinnamon phase black bear. They can range in kind of any variation from that very light color to that very jet black color. And in some parts of the country, they can even be white. We don't have those, that color phase here, but this does generate a lot of confusion. So folks get a picture of what they see as a brown bear, and they think it's a brown bear, or in other words, grizzly bear, but we only actually have black bears within the state, the species black bear within the state. Next slide. And black bears are distinguishable between grizzly bears. And if you look at a photographs, black bears have a very sloped forehead, very round and erect ears. Grizzly bears have a characteristic hump on their shoulders, and black bears don't have that. So black bears have a much more sloped forehead, a less blocky head. But interestingly, as black bears grow older, their skulls continue to grow. So while in this picture on the right, those ears are very prominent at bear ages, and so the ears are a little bit less noticeable. And that's one way in photos is a much older bear. Next slide. Now, when we talk about bears being classified as carnivores, they don't just eat meat. Now, they will eat some meat, but 90% of their diet actually consists of mostly vegetation. They do feed very heavily on insects. And when you think about that, you're thinking about such a large creature. It's pretty amazing that they can get to those sizes, feeding on such a variety of different foods. And their foods are very seasonal. So in the summer, they're really looking at berries and forbs. In the spring, when they come out of their den, the very first vegetation that comes up in wetlands and things like that are a primary food source. They'll actually graze on grasses until the berries become available and insects become more abundant. And then as summer wears on, they really focus on those summer fruits. And this time of year, they're actually switching over to a period called hyperphagia. And this is where bears literally try to acquire as many calories as they possibly can. So they're feeding for almost 20 hours a day. They're trying to consume about 20,000 calories. And fall fruits, so sassafras berries, apples, cherries, things like that are very important. And then acorn mast, so that hard mast fall nuts are really their primary food source this time of year. And they're really relying on those types of foods to gain as much weight as they possibly can so they can survive the winter in the den. But you have to think of bears as a big raccoon. So we're not trying to say or minimizing the strength of a bear or the level of damage that they could cause compared to a raccoon. But what we're saying is if a raccoon would eat it, so would a bear. And so bears are attracted to bird feeders, deer feeders, garbage, barbecue grills, smokers, coolers that are left at campsites and things like that. So all of those human associated food sources can really draw bears into residential areas, into farmsteads, around homes and things like that. And it's not surprising that they're attracted to those types of foods because they're often very easy to get at. You could have a bear that might wander through a neighborhood and find pet food that's left out. And that pet food's pretty calorie rich. And so right now, if a bear's trying to get about 20,000 calories a day, all it would take for that bear to meet its daily caloric needs is to get a 20-pound bag of pet food. And they would be able to get to those calorie needs a lot quicker than having to forage naturally. Now, those natural foods are preferred, but you will have some bears that often focus on those human-associated foods. And when they become accustomed to that, that's when they start to frequent these areas. And bears are very long-lived, so they have a very good memory, and they'll come back to those human-associated foods year after year. So there's really a lot that we try to do to get ahead of the game and remind folks to put up those different types of attractants if you're in bear country, because it's a lot easier to be preventative than it is to be reactive and try to get get a bear to move on. Now, bears do have poor eyesight relative to their sense of smell. They're capable of seeing, but their sense of smell is so incredible. It's greater than that of a dog, and they can smell food up to a mile away. So when they're cruising the landscape, sometimes those human-associated food sources come out and stand out pretty well for them, and they can follow that nose into those human-associated foods. And then also they follow the trails of other bears. So if you have a bear that's frequenting a deer feeder or frequenting bird feeders and going back and forth, carrying that food scent on their paws, other bears might take the opportunity and follow that scent trail in and visit those human-associated foods as well. Next slide. Now, bears are forest-dwelling species, so they really prefer to live in large tracts of heavily wooded forest. And so in Missouri, you're really talking about the Ozark region of the state. But they're very capable of utilizing other areas. So they're often very capable of utilizing suburban areas and ex-urban areas. And really it comes down to, as long as there's sufficient green space for them to find cover and that connectivity that lets them find those areas, you can have bears that can live and have their home ranges essentially overlap a town, and they'll visit those neighborhoods looking for food. They'll go back into the forested areas. And so the photo on the right here is, you can kind of see how sometimes neighborhoods are juxtaposed to that forest, and it makes it really, really easy for bears to find those residential areas, find those human associated foods. Now, here in Missouri, our research has shown that our bears are quite choosy right now. They select very high quality forested habitat. And that's not surprising because we do have a low density bear population that's spread throughout a large geographic area. But as that population continues to grow, we will have bears that start to use those more marginal habitats. And we already have bears that utilize neighborhoods and will take advantage of those human associated foods and go into some of those more marginal habitats. But as that population continues to expand, that's likely to continue to increase as well. Next slide. Now, bears are one of a unique set of species that actually go through a period of winter dormancy. So we often talk about bears as hibernating. They're technically not true hibernators. They go through this period of lengthy inactivity during the winter months, but they go through a little bit of physiological changes that differentiate them from true hibernators. Now, when bears enter that winter den, they generally enter that winter den in late fall, early winter. So here in Missouri, the vast majority of our bears have denned by Thanksgiving. But that depends on food. If it becomes too costly to find food, then they will enter that den earlier. If food remains abundant, they may stay active for a little bit longer. But when they enter this winter den, they rarely eat, they don't defecate, they don't urinate while they're in the den. They go through some pretty incredible physiological changes. So their body temperature and heart rate decreases significantly, their metabolism decreases significantly. And since they are not eating, drinking, or going to the bathroom, their body actually turns into a recycling system. So they live off of the fat that they've accumulated during the fall and late summer months. And that fat can last them for about 6 months. So in really cold areas, bears will den for up to 6 months. Here, they don't stay in the den quite that long, but they still do stay in the den for a very lengthy time period without eating or drinking. And they're essentially living off of that fat stores. And as their body recycles that waste, it replenishes their bones and their muscles. And so they don't lose muscle mass, they don't lose bone density while they're in that period of inactivity. Now, in general, they select protected den sites, so areas that are generally protected from the elements, rock caves, crevices, down trees, crown nests, tree cavities. All of those types of things are potential den sites for black bears. And here in Missouri, den sites are not any kind of shortage. We have a lot of karst topography, so we do have bears that den in caves and den in rock holes in the ground and things like that. But we also have a lot of bears that den in other den types as well. So they're not totally reliant on that cave type structure. They will den under down trees and in those hollow trees. But we also have bears that just make a ground nest, and they are completely unprotected from the elements. They'll sit in that den, they'll rear cubs in the den, in that type of den. So there's a real variety of den types that we see here in the state. Next slide. Now, the bear breeding season is June and July, and so that's kind of the peak time of movement. So males cover huge distances during that time period. It also coincides when yearling bears disperse. So bears that are between 16 and 18 months old, they leave their mother and they go off great distances. Males travel huge distances. They'll cover a lot of ground, basically trying to find a spot to set up shop. And while that mating season goes on in June and July, the bears actually don't give birth until they enter the winter den in February. And they go through a really neat physiological process called delayed implantation. And that allows the bears to basically get in good enough body condition so that they can sustain themselves and a litter of cubs through the winter. So if a bear is not in great body condition, then generally that embryo won't implant and she won't have cubs in the den that year. And so those cubs are generally born around February, and litters range from 1 to 4 cubs. Our average is just over 2 here. And this year we did document a litter of 4. So that was the first time with our research project we documented a litter of 4. Next slide. Now, when you're out in bear country, so spending any time in the Ozarks, it's a really good idea. Just keep an eye out. You might run across bear sign, and you're probably more likely to see bear sign than you are to see the actual bear. So bears, they generally don't want to be around people. If they hear you coming in the woods, they're often moving off before you even catch a glimpse of them. But you might run across tracks, and so those tracks you can see here on the left and on the right. They almost resemble what looks like a human footprint without a shoe on. They have 5 toes, and while they do have very large claws, those claws don't often register. And that's one of the differences between black bear tracks and grizzly bear tracks. So if you were out west in an area that had both species, that's one way to differentiate them. So we don't often see all of the claws with black bear tracks. Next slide. You might also come across scat, especially if you are in an area, say, where there's a good blackberry patch, or if it's the fall and you happen to be in an area with a lot of acorns. Now, the scat is very dynamic. It changes shape depending on what the bear's eating and the time of year. And so the contents vary significantly. In the summer, when bears are eating berries, it almost looks like jelly because they are almost exclusively consuming berries. So there's quite a lot of variability there. If you ever came across scat and were curious if it was bear scat or not, one, it's segmented. It does not have twists in it. So coyote scat has twists to it. That's one thing that is commonly misinterpreted for bear scat. Another thing that is often mistaken for bear scat is raccoon scat, and really the size is the difference there. So in terms of the size, bear scat would obviously be much larger, but the contents are often very similar because, again, bears do eat a lot of the same foods that raccoons would eat. Next slide. Now, we've conducted a variety of different types of research on black bears here in Missouri. In the early 90s, we had been monitoring the growth and expansion of the bear population through bait station surveys, through reports from the public, but we really entered a phase of intensive research starting in 2010. And in 2010, this study really focused on gaining an understanding of how many bears we had in the state at that time. So we conducted a hair snare study, and essentially this is a barbed wire corrals that were set up throughout southwestern Missouri, looking at collecting bear fur. So with that bear fur, we can get genetic information and identify individual bears, and then we can see how many times those bears are, in quotations, captured essentially at these different bait station sites. You can see the distance between where you detect one bear and how frequently you detect that same bear at other sites. And through a statistical process, you can get at an initial population estimate. So with this study, we determined that we had about 300 bears within the state at the time of that study. So again, this was conducted from 2010 to 2012. And that estimate doesn't include cubs of the year because these types of hair snares aren't likely to detect the cubs of the year because of their size at the time that these hair snares are set up. Now, with this study, we also looked at bear movements and habitats. So we had collars on bears to look at how they interacted with the various hair snares, what type of habitat requirements they had. So we gained a really good foundational understanding of where our bear population was at that time. But the one thing that this study doesn't tell us or can't tell us is how quickly that population is growing. So next slide. So to get at that question, we initiated a secondary study that began around 2014, 2015. And that really looked at understanding survival, cub production, how many cubs are born each year, how many cubs make it to age 1 each year, what are adult female survival rates, and those are really the driving factors of population growth. With these collars that we have out on bears, we also take a really detailed look at movements. We've identified important habitat corridors for bears, what types of forests they're using, what available habitat looks like here in Missouri. And so we've gained a really, really detailed understanding of the vital rates that drive our population. And to do this, we trap bears during the spring and summer. We fit them with collars. And then we can follow those females to their winter den and immobilize the female at the winter den, count the number of cubs that she has, determine the sex ratio of the litter, because that's another important factor determining population growth, and then revisit that female the next year and see how many of those cubs survive to age 1. And so we can look at reproductive intervals, a lot of the key factors that really help us understand how our population's growing. Next slide. So with this study, we were able to collect a lot of very important information on the vital rates that drive our population. And so all of the areas highlighted in green here are Missouri-specific data that we were able to collect through this study to inform a population model that really is designed to help us understand the growth and trajectory of our population. Now, for some of these categories, our sample size was low. So the areas that are highlighted in bold, we had lower sample sizes, and so the rates that we were able to estimate this were likely a little unrealistic. They were very high compared to what's been published from other research studies. So to ensure that our model is conservative in the estimate that we're putting out, we actually used literature values. So basically information from other published literature, published research studies, to ensure that we're looking at this from a realistic standpoint. So both Missouri specific data, and then in those instances where we had lower sample sizes, so those two bolded portions, we looked at some of those other research projects to help inform that. Next slide. So with this, we can get an estimate of how quickly our population's growing. So again, in 2012, we started with about 300 bears. That did not include cubs of the year. So to include cubs of the year there, we were at about 350 bears in 2012. Next slide. And by 2019, when we ran this population model, we determined that our bear population had grown to about 540 to 840 black bears within the state. Next slide. And as that population continues to grow at the growth rate that it's at, we'd expect this population to double in about 10 years. So we are looking at a very rapidly growing and expanding bear population here. And this is not something that's surprising. This fits in with other areas that have had recolonizing bear populations. So not anything that is surprising there, but again, a rapidly growing bear population. Next slide. Now, MDC had a black bear management plan that was initially developed in 1993. It was redeveloped again in 2008. And that 2008 management plan really identified some of those key research needs. And that got us to the point of identifying those specific research projects that we were just discussing. And at around 2018, it was about time to update that plan again. And so we sat down with the MDC Black Bear Task Force, so representatives from across a variety of different branches within the department, as well as agency partners within the Forest Service, Park Service, and Department of Natural Resources. All of those folks have lands that bears use, and so they obviously have an opportunity here to help redevelop this black bear management plan. So we went through a process, gathered public input on the draft of this plan, the draft goals and objectives of this plan, and then also collected additional staff input, conducted a series of open houses to provide information and gathered that public input, made refinements to the plan. And this plan was actually signed in May of 2020 and is designed to guide bear management for the next 10 years. Next slide. And in looking at this plan, the mission statement is really to use science-based methods to manage a self-sustaining population of black bear, which are a native species, increasing bear awareness, minimizing human-bear conflicts, and providing recreational opportunities for all Missourians. Next slide. Now, this plan has 3 goals. The first goal is really using those science-based methods to manage a self-sustaining population of black bear. So focus on research and monitoring, population management, habitat management. Our current research projects fit in line with this goal and essentially would be continuations of those research projects, as well as additional opportunities for different types of projects that we could do to gain additional understanding of our black bear population. Next slide. The second goal is a really important one. This focuses on increasing statewide awareness of Missouri's bear population and management program. And we do an awful lot right now, getting information about being bear aware, helping folks understand what to do if you encounter a bear, how to behave if you see a bear, all of those types of things. But there's also a lot more that we can do. So this goal really focuses on adding to that existing education program, evaluating what we're doing, making adjustments as that population grows, but also looking at targeted outreach. So the information that may go to one community might be different than another community. So for communities that already have bears and are already kind of used to being bear aware, the information needs that they have might be a little bit different than a community that maybe doesn't have bears quite yet, but is very likely to based on their proximity to our population and the habitat that surrounds their communities. So looking at those different ways that we can provide some of that statewide information as well as very targeted outreach to help folks be very proactive as that population continues to grow. Next slide. And then the last goal really focuses on minimizing and addressing human-bear conflicts. So when you have bears and humans sharing the landscape, you will never fully prevent human-bear conflicts. But there's a lot that we can do to minimize those conflicts and be very proactive, try to address them before they occur. But if those conflicts do occur, then responding to those situations. So in these instances, working with communities to understand how to bear-proof dumpsters and bear-proof trash cans, working with beekeepers to put up electric fencing, and a lot of different ways that we can address and minimize those human-bear conflicts. Next slide. Now, MDC is also at the point where we've proposed the establishment of a limited and very highly regulated black bear hunting season. We do not currently have a black bear hunting season, but we're in the process of proposing that framework. So this season's really designed to provide opportunity for Missourians to participate in the sustainable harvest of black bear, which are a valuable natural resource here, and is limited in a couple of different ways. So a 1 bear bag limit per permit, a permit quota, so it would limit the number of hunters per zone, as well as a harvest quota, so it would limit the harvest per zone, and this would ensure sustainable harvest of our bear population. So right now, we are at the step where the Conservation Commission recently approved moving forward to the next steps of the regulations process. So this opens up an official public comment period from October 16th to November 14th. And folks can submit comments online. You can go to the MDC webpage and navigate to the regulations page. You can submit comments that way. Or there's also a quick link at mdc.mo.gov/bears that would also take you to that regulations page. And so if this were to move forward, the public comment period is a 30-day comment period. The commission will evaluate all comments that were received, and should they move the regulations forward, that would establish the framework for a bear hunting season. And then if the commission establishes a permit quota and a harvest quota, the earliest a season could occur here in Missouri would be the fall of 2021. So this is not something where we have a season currently. We're in the steps of proposing that season. Next slide. Now there's a couple of things, and we'll go through this pretty quickly, but if you're interested in learning more about being bear aware, we have tons of information on our website. So if you spend any time in the Ozarks or you live in the southern half of Missouri, it's a really good idea to think about what it means to be bear aware, what it means to look at your landscape and make sure that if a bear does wander through, you're not attracting that bear to your property. And if you do live in an area where bears are established, what are the things that you can do to make sure that you're not providing those types of foods for your bears and working with your neighbor? So never approach or feed bears, remove all of those different types of food sources. And if you have a bear that comes through your property, let your neighbors know, because a lot of times folks just are not aware of the steps that they can take to minimize and prevent those conflicts. And we always talk about a fed bear being a dead bear. And unfortunately, this is one of those old adages that often rings true. When bears become accustomed to human-associated foods, they often become more bold in how they try to acquire those foods. So they might start breaking into dumpsters, they might start breaking into chicken coops and beehives and things like that. And as a bear progresses down that path, if they start to become more bold in seeking out those foods, unfortunately, those are the bears that do end up needing to be removed from the population. And that is preventable. There's plenty of natural foods out there for bears, and there's an awful lot that we can do on our part to make sure that we're not attracting bears to our landscape. Next slide. So if you see a bear in your yard, make loud noises, alert that bear of your presence, remove any of those food sources if you do have any out there after the bear's left. And if you have persistent bears that are coming in, we do have wildlife damage biologists that spend a lot of their time during the summer months working with folks that have bears coming to their property. So there's a lot of different things that those damage biologists can do to help you address what it is that bear's doing when it comes to visit your property. Next slide. If you encounter a bear, talk to the bear in a calm voice, back away, don't run. You can raise your arms up to look a little bit larger and give that bear an escape route. It's not a photo opportunity. If that bear runs up a tree, it's not an opportunity to get closer and get a photo. But this is really your opportunity to just back away and let that bear move off on its own. Next slide. Now, if you encounter a bear, there's some things that a bear might do. So a bear might stand up. This is not an aggressive behavior. It's simply the bear trying to look at what's going on, get wind of what's going on, figure out what the noises are, things like that. If it climbs a tree, this is its escape mechanism. So this is the bear trying to leave and move away from what it perceives as danger. Unfortunately, in these types of situations, a lot of times folks will use this as an opportunity to get closer. Oftentimes a crowd ensues, and that's not the situation that we'd like to see. So if a bear climbs a tree, this is its way of telling you it's uncomfortable, and it will, if you back out, that bear will come down when it feels ready. Bears will make a variety of different sounds, a popping sound, a huffing sound when they feel uncomfortable. And the very last step of a bear showing that it's really uncomfortable is a bluff charge. And so this is where a bear runs at a person and stops short of making contact. And in these instances, if you are carrying bear spray, that would be the appropriate time to deploy bear spray. But bluff charges are very rare, and bears frequently will give you plenty of warning that they don't like what's going on. So if you're out there hiking and you do encounter a bear, the best thing that you can do is just back away and let that bear leave on its own. Bear attacks in North America have happened, but they are extremely, extremely rare. We have never had a bear attack here in Missouri, but it is something where it's a possibility to think about. But when you take those precautions, you don't draw bears into your neighborhood, you don't draw bears into your campsite, you allow those bears to leave. If you do have happen to see them while you're out hiking or in your yard, that lessens the likelihood of any type of negative interactions. Next slide. Now, if you happen to see a bear, we ask that you submit a report. So that's unfortunately the website's grayed out at the bottom, but it's just mdc.mo.gov/report bears. And this is a great way for you to let us know what you saw. If you have a photo of a bear, you can upload the photo at this point. And we use those sightings from the public for a variety of different things. So we use that to track that expansion of the bear population, kind of looking at where we're getting reports. Oftentimes, especially if a bear shows up outside of that typical bear range, we get a flurry of reports, and we can kind of track how that bear is moving across some of those areas that are outside of what would be typical bear range. And we can also look at what's going on. So if we're starting to get reports of bears visiting bird feeders in a specific location, that's our opportunity to work with those communities, work with those neighbors to make sure that those attractants are being removed, and we can be kind of opportunistic in that education. So being able to monitor what types of reports are coming in. So if you do have a bear sighting, we ask that you submit it to us, and you'll get a response from somebody on the bear crew. It's a great opportunity also to reply back if you've got any additional questions. And I think that is the last of it. So I'm not sure if we've got time for questions, but I'd be happy to address them. And if not, you can find a lot of the answers on our website at mdc.mo.gov/bears.
Hey, Laura, we do have a question. Are bears
Sure.
meant to ascend stairs on an elevated deck to access a barbecue grill?
They absolutely will. So bears will climb up onto just about anything. So we often get reports of bears coming to hummingbird feeders on decks. A lot of folks will hang hummingbird feeders on their deck. Bears will climb up that if they don't use the stairs, sometimes they'll access it if there's a tree that overhangs. So they are perfectly capable of getting onto different types of elevated platforms. They will occasionally even climb up a tree stand. So there's also that possibility that they might investigate different scents in a variety of different settings. So yeah, they're very capable at that.
Laura, thank you so much. We appreciate
No problem.
all the information that you shared this morning. So now I think we do know more about bears. Obviously, there's been a lot more curiosity and interest since Bruno the bear recently visited and passed through our state. So the timing was really good on this.
Good. Yep.
You have one more question.
Oh, and there is one more question.
Okay.
Laura, it's why is the current population size estimate so wide?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that there is that range, when we look at that population model, for one, you can't go out and count exactly how many bears there are. And for that 2012 estimate, there was a range surrounding that. We communicated it as about 300 bears, but there was a range there also. So one, we can't know exactly how many cubs are born every year. And so we have a range in the estimate of those various parameters that go into the population model. And so when we use that population model, it basically runs a variety of simulations through the range of all of those different reproductive values. And so it gives us a more realistic look at where that population is at compared to just looking at one individual number. The other part of it too is that our bear population is not a closed population. So again, we are connected to that population in Missouri and Arkansas as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so now it's time for Colton to share with all of us more about Conservation Leadership Corps and how to engage youth with your organization. Colton.
All right. Give us just a minute here. We're getting our students on board. I'll give a brief introduction as myself as they're getting their videos ready. Anyway, some of you might know me. My name is Colton Zirkel. I am the Education and Communications Coordinator at the Conservation Federation. And I actually came up through the Conservation Leadership Corps program myself. Oh, we're back. All right. And I was in the program from 2010 to 2014. And then I got the opportunity to take this position. So now I help run those programs along with the YCA committee. So the purpose of this segment, we have several questions that we have prepared beforehand to ask these students on how they can be more involved with our affiliate groups. So we might have time also for a couple of questions from you guys, the audience. So feel free to send those into the Q&A section at any time. Are we on? Emily, Cassandra, Ashley?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I'm on here.
Yes, I'm.
Okay, so I can't see you guys, so we'll go alphabetically. Ashley, go ahead and introduce yourself with your name, school, and how long you've been involved in CLC.
Hi, can you see me now?
Yes, we're good to go.
Okay, great. I'm Ashley Herdina. I'm at the University of Missouri right now, and this will be my third year in CLC.
Okay, Cassandra?
I'm Cassandra Barker. I go to UCM and I've been in CLC since 2017.
All right, and Emily?
And I'm Emily Gephardt. I go to the University of Missouri as well, and I've been in CLC for 3 years.
All right, well, it's great to have you guys here. So we'll go ahead and jump right in to these questions. So what would draw you, the student, to an event? Does your life experience, for instance, your student bringing you, or your parents bringing you to events, have anything to do with it? Is it based on passion, credit for class? Do you have to have it? So that's kind of several questions, but the main idea is what as a student would draw you to an affiliate event?
I'll start if that's okay with you guys. I think personally, one thing, I mean, passion for sure. I know growing up, I was in FFA, so different events that I attended with that program was mostly because I had the interest in these things and these topics that they put on. I also know there's been events that I've gone to just because I need the credit for the class. One thing that I think of too, though, is being able to bring friends with me also helps to kind of get me to want to go and to meet new people, or even just having the opportunity to meet some of those members prior to going to the event. That way that I'm comfortable because I know someone when I get there. So.
And yeah, I definitely agree with Ashley that a lot of that is fueled by passion and fueled by things that I'm interested in and that I love to do. And when I'm interested in them, I'll want to go to those events that pertain to them. But I think it's also, I feel like events for me are more engaging when I can actively participate in them. So if I can actively participate and feel like I'm a part of that event, I'm more likely to want to go and to be a part of it.
I agree with Emily. Being able to like actively participate in the event definitely makes me want to go. My mom took me to Berwick Woods events since I was little, so that probably plays a part in it too.
Great, thank you guys. So Ashley, you brought up another point that transitions us into another question. It says youth are social and like to be in groups. How can we get more groups to attend our events and not just one student?
Yeah, I think this one goes into kind of what I was saying is when I know that I can, encourage some of my close friends to come with me, that helps me feel more comfortable. And also if there's the opportunity to meet people in the club prior to going to an event, that helps a lot because I feel that at least I know someone around the room.
And something else too is at a lot of universities, there are like student clubs that are looking for things to go and do together and looking for things that they can all go do, and they're already like bigger pre-established groups. So one thing that you could do is just make sure that those clubs and organizations in the community and in the universities around you are aware of the events that you're holding, because there are a lot of people that would be interested in going to them.
Going off of what Emily said, a lot of schools have wildlife societies, and if you reach out to them, the whole group could go to different events.
Right, Cassandra, and Emily, that's a great point. So for the affiliates that are watching, I have lists of contact persons at each university that have the contact info for the Wildlife Society or their biology club or their agriculture clubs. So if you guys have an event, you can send that to me and I'll make sure you guys get connected with those people at each university that are in your area. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions? Okay. So from the affiliate's perspective, what is the best way we can communicate with students?
I think for this one, obviously through social media, I think that's the best way to stay in contact with students. And I think that's something that a lot of people are getting used to nowadays with the different circumstances. But also I think, reaching out to different clubs like Colton, if you have the list, and putting them in contact with people like that. Also, once we start to do more in-person things, I know personally I'm more willing to do something if I meet that person that's in charge of that situation, or I hear about it a little bit in person and kind of see different things that they're doing. That definitely helps me be more encouraged to go to that event.
And I definitely agree with Ashley on the concept of using social media to communicate with students, just because almost every student has some social media platform, and it's just a really easy way to get information to people relatively quickly.
Social media is a really good way to like communicate with students, but also certain professors will send out big emails to like the entire biology group about opportunities and stuff coming up that are conservation related. So getting a hold of like the biology professors could also help you get in contact with students.
Yeah, so it's good you guys mentioned this as well, but also affiliates, I have contact students at each university as well. So if you're looking for other students that are in your area that are strictly CLC and not part of this, you know, each biology group, I can share those names, or you can send me the events. And right now with COVID, we're really looking for a lot of these where we can have only a small group of students attend, especially outdoor events where maybe they can be given a task to do. Also, our students, a lot of them are really good with technology. So if you're having virtual events and you'd like to have a student present for just a few minutes maybe at the beginning or the end of one of your virtual events, please send that information to me and I'll make sure that it gets to the students. So all three of you mentioned social media, but I want to know which platforms you guys are using, because even for me, I know that most students, you know, kids these days aren't on Facebook. So where can we find you guys as students?
I know one, like Instagram. I know that's something that I look at all the time, and I know different students who look at it daily. And Instagram and Snapchat, as much as Snapchat's not a great social media platform, it's definitely something that's very popular. Facebook is also, I know a lot of people on Facebook, like students on Facebook, and I have a couple programs that are going through Facebook. So I don't think it's completely off the table yet. It's just something that I think you have to encourage students to use more. And I think people my age are learning that that's something that they need to kind of have in their back pocket for different programs.
Yeah, I feel like Facebook is more effective than Instagram when it comes to like planning events and communicating information and dates and stuff like that. But if you're trying to communicate like something more just like informational posts and things like that, Instagram, I feel like I use more prevalently for things like that. But for events, I feel like Facebook is more useful and better at communicating things like that, if that makes sense.
I agree that Facebook and Instagram would be better for like events, but there's also TikTok where you can make short little videos that you could use to catch a lot of students' attention, I think.
Great. Do we have any questions from the floor yet?
The social media was the best way to reach students. Platform worked best.
Okay.
That was the question.
Okay. Well, I've got a couple more if you
Go. We have plenty.
All right. Students, this is from the perspective of an affiliate, potential perspective. I feel like students tend to be last minute planners. They are busy and their time has lots of options. How do we get these last minute planners to events when we know we need staff materials and planning?
I think this question I kind of struggled with, and Emily and Cassandra might have a better answer. I just know, you know, if a student is a last minute planner, they're gonna last minute plan. There's not a lot you can do with that. I know different programs that they do the best where if you just inform them ahead of time, if you give them a date, a time, remind them a couple times, that's the best way to try to help them not last minute plan. But sometimes I think it's on the students. They have to be the ones to fix it, not necessarily the affiliates or the program. So I guess my suggestion would just be do the best you can to remind them and keep the date for something like in front of them as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree with Ashley. And one thing that I was thinking about this too is that students' schedules get really full really quickly. So the sooner that a student would know about an event, the sooner that they would put that in their calendar and save a time spot for it. So I feel like it would be really important just to get information out and get dates out and give them to the younger groups of people sooner rather than later. So that if they're passionate about that thing and if that's something they actively want to be involved in, they'll have it in their schedule before it gets full of all of the other stuff.
I think also doing events that are more like open house type, where students can like stop by for like a few minutes to an hour and like see the event that way. When the schedules are really busy, it's easier to do that instead of have like an event that's a certain time and then ends a certain time.
Great. So again, affiliates, I hope you're, thinking about ways that we can get these students involved. We've got a great group of students, and we've actually just taken on 20 new CLC students, and their first experience will be next weekend with our fall workshop. So if you have any of these ideas that you already have planned this fall, go ahead and send me those so that I can get them out to them this next weekend. So I've got another question. What is more attractive to students, volunteering or just being a part of the organization and attending events?
I know personally for myself, when I'm a part of an organization, it's a little more appealing because I know that I can kind of set goals with that organization for myself, and I have a better chance to achieve those goals by attending these events and doing these things. And sometimes like you make those friendships and those connections through organizations that you're with for a long time, opposed to just a day here or two where you're volunteering with a program.
I feel like a lot of youth, when they're passionate about something, they'll want to be actively involved and they'll want to actively participate and communicate with other people in the organization. So I feel like active participation is definitely more attractive to a lot of people.
I think active participation is important, but I think volunteering is also something that a lot of people would see to be more interesting, because with volunteering, it's like you can do it whenever you need to, like whenever they have an event, then you can go help out with it. And you can still make all those connections and build some skills and stuff through the program or through the organization.
We have a question. What is the range of CLC education interests or degree programs, current and typical? What is the range of CLC educational interests or degree programs, current and typical?
Okay, I'll start off with that and then I'll let our students tell you what their degree program is. Right now, it kind of runs the entire width of the conservation, environmentalism, and agriculture spectrum. So we have students from all of those branches. I know of a student that just graduated out of the program that's actually going into law school. So his undergraduate was in conservation and he's going into law school now. So not only are our students in conservation type things, but they're also doing communications work, and they can use all of those degrees to help in conservation. So the students, will you guys tell us what your majors are at your university?
My major is natural resources, and I'm focused on fisheries and wildlife.
My major is with biological sciences, and I am kind of looking more in the aspect of like zoology and animal behavior is kind of my little subset within that.
My major is wildlife and natural resource conservation, but I'm minoring in anthropology to do more stuff with museums and maybe go into paleontology and dinosaur bones a little bit more.
Awesome, thank you guys. All right, so I've got at least one more. Yeah, one more. What is your view on the use of technology to get youth outdoors? Should we use it and embrace it or discourage it?
I think for getting programs and events set up, social media is definitely the way to go because that's how you're going to reach the most people and the quickest. I know, but like if I'm outside, I try not to be on my phone because obviously if you're going to enjoy the outdoors, you need to look up away from your screen and you need to be a part of it and get a little dirty here and there. So I think to some extent it's helpful when you're setting things up. But I think if you're going to do events outside and if you're going to put on different things like that, don't necessarily encourage the technology in that situation because you want the youth to be able to see things and they're not going to see them if they're looking at a screen or they're using their phone to do things. And also, I know I get really bad about it. Like when I go somewhere beautiful, I want to sit there and take a million pictures, but I also think it's really important to put the phone down and just enjoy it and not worry about the picture that is going to sit on my phone for years and may or may not ever be seen again, you know?
I feel like technology should definitely be embraced in the aspect that that's how you can most effectively communicate all of your information to a very large group of people. But I also agree that when you're actually doing something outside, that's when technology definitely shouldn't play nearly as important of a role. And I feel like it's also important to embrace it now because we have to realize that in the future it's going to be used even more. And the next generation will depend on technology for communication even more than we do at this point. So I feel like we should start embracing it sooner rather than later.
I think we should definitely embrace the use of technology. As for like during programs and stuff, I think you should encourage the kids to use their phones to take pictures because a lot of those kids don't have a life outside the cell phone. So encouraging them to bring the technology into nature is one step into getting them completely into nature. So I wouldn't discourage the use of technology.
That's great. Thank you, guys. I know that there are plenty of programs out there that you can have applications on your phone for identifying plants or birds, or I use one called iNaturalist that it will help you identify, like we appreciate having you on here. You offer a great perspective. And thank you to our affiliates. We would sure like to get involved more with your organizations. And at the moment, some of our students are not allowed to leave campus. That's not every university, but that's a couple in the state. So virtual events in those cases, please let me know as well. And then go ahead and send me information that you have on events and we'll try to get your students plugged in. So thank you very much and hope to talk to you again soon.
Colton, thanks so much. And Ashley, Cassandra, and Emily, really appreciate what you had to share this morning. And I don't think we put you on the spot too much, but good luck next week at the fall workshop. I think that will be another real good learning and networking opportunity for the students. So we're wrapping up our first day of our summit. I want to thank everyone. Thank certainly the speakers that were here this morning or are with us remotely through the virtual mechanisms. And I think it went very smoothly. Michelle, thanks for your patience and keeping us all calm as we went through this. So this is a learning experience, and appreciate everybody's good attention. And really look forward to having you back here tomorrow for the second day of the summit. But then please don't forget this evening, we would love to have you participate. You're invited to join us for our 85th celebration between 5 and 6. You can still register. So if you can make it, please do so. Thanks again and have a really good rest of your day, and be safe and stay well.